Hey guys, welcome to this SQL tutorial. In this tutorial, we are going to talk about how we can work with a SQL server, and we'll see all the components of the SQL server which are very useful in manipulating or querying the data which is saved in the database. But before I start the discussion, let's see the agendas that we're going to cover for the next few sessions in terms of understanding the SQL server basics. The things that I'm going to cover in this particular tutorial is related to database management system, installations, type of database architecture, introductions, SQL, tables in SQL. We'll see how we can work with the various SQL command like create, use, drop database. I'll also talk about the data type in SQL, what are constraints, how relational database plays an important role, and the work of primary and foreign key. Apart from this, there are a lot of other topics that I'm going to be a part of this discussion. I hope you will be benefited by the end of this particular discussion and you can work extensively with the SQL server and you can query any data from the database and you can get the desired result of the output. Now, what is a database? A database is nothing but an organized collection of data stored in an electronic format. Now that sounds quite technical, right? It's nothing but the data that is collected around us through various types of source, like various types of business, whether it's a digital business, whether it's a business related to any product, customer or service. The data is captured in a various format. Now when we organize this data in an electronic format, we call it a database. Now that electronic format follows various rules and regulations, various types of permissions and authentications to save the data in that particular format. To take care of those format and permissions and authentications, there is a software which takes care of creating and managing the data that is saved in electronic, and that particular software is called Database Management System. And SQL is one such software which helps to create and manage the data that is saved in the database in that electronic format. Now every database has an architecture. Now let's understand what is the architecture. Database architecture are divided into two forms, the file server and the client server. Now, what is a file server? A file server can be best explained in a way. Suppose you have an Excel file and you have shared your Excel file to your friend. Now, if you do any changes in the Excel file, the original Excel file, the change cannot be seen by your friend. In a file server architecture, the computer or the server act as a storage device where the storage device can be accessed by only one person at a time. So, file server architecture is a process, or you can say an architecture, where the system or the computer or the server act as a storage device. Now, what is a client server architecture? A client server architecture can be best explained by this particular image, where you can see three client server in the left hand side, or you can consider it as a client system or the end user system, and the system which is in between can be considered as a network system which is interacting with the database. Now let's understand this client server architecture with the help of a very simple example. Now suppose there are three users who are accessing the IRCTC website. Now these three computers are the user computer where they are querying or they have requested to know the timings of a particular train. Now, when the request is generated by its end user computers, the network computer processes that request and fetch the information from the database and provide it to the end. Now, over here, there can be n number of end user. Now, this particular network server, which is between the end user and the database, process each and every query, and the database simultaneously takes the request for each of the users and sends the required query in terms of the request made. Now this was the client server architecture. Now let's come to the important part for which this particular discussion has been started. Now, in order to take care of these queries, we use language, and SQL is such a language you can say, or you can say such a software which interacts with the database. Now SQL stands for Structured Query Language, which is used for accessing and manipulating the data. So SQL is a software which helps to talk with the or interact with the database and helps to access or manipulate the database, which is available in the form of tables in the database. Now what is a table? A table is a database object which comprises of rows and columns. A table is always in a tabular format which is made up with some rows and columns. Now a table has two important components. One is record and the other one is field. As you can see in the image, a record is an individual entry of a table, and a field provides a specific information about the data in the table. To be very precise, a record is a single entry or a row, and the field is a value that is available in a particular column. Now we use certain command in SQL to interact with the database. Now there are four important commands that we deal with. The first is the data query language. The second is data definition language, and the third is the data manipulation language. Fourth is data control language. Now these four important commands are used for interacting with the table and the data that is stored in the database. Data query language like select, data definition language is used for creating, altering or dropping the table structure. Now to manipulate the data in the table, we use the data manipulation language, which is like insert or updating the table data or deleting a table data. And the last one is related to the data security, where we work with the concepts like permission or authentications which are allocated to the end user or the person who is going to work on the database. So this was the basic of SQL that we need to know for this particular session. I hope you have learned about a good idea about the basics of SQL and what are the things that we are going to talk about in the upcoming sessions. In my next discussion, I'll be talking about a detailed process of as how we can install a SQL server into our system. Thank you for watching this particular video.